What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another one of our videos. I'm Ralli Roots.
I'm Ralli Roots.
And together we are Ralli Roots. So today's video is going to be a little bit different than some of our other videos. We were talking, and one thing that we really want to come across in this channel is one of the main reasons why we even started YouTube was to help new resellers. When we first started reselling, we didn't really have any resources to go through. We didn't have anybody to kind of lean on. So we started this channel to give good advice to newer resellers.
Yeah, I think our number one thing was we didn't realize we could go to YouTube and Instagram and to other social media outlets and find other people who did what we did because we didn't understand that what we were doing had a community around it, right? And so you found the community, but now you have all these really good questions for us and we can address them and share our experiences with you so you don't make the same mistakes we did because we weren't wise enough to go out looking for the resources that you've already found.
So today's video is going to be just us chatting about the top 5 mistakes that we made as brand new eBay sellers. And I think that these 5 mistakes will kind of help you guys out, or hopefully it will help a lot of you guys out.
Yeah.
There's kind of simple mistakes, but I think they're ones that a lot of us, when we first start out, we make these mistakes. And we kind of we wanted to share with you guys how we avoid making those mistakes now. So, that's what this video is going to be about, our top 5 mistakes that we made as
Ryan's
brand new.
top 5 mistakes he made.
Most of these are definitely my mistakes, let's be honest. But yeah, let's chat about them. So mistake number 1 is that we bought inventory without doing research. I think a lot of people do this when they first start selling. They'll see a YouTube video or they'll see a post or something and they'll say, oh, I can do that. I can be a reseller. This is really prevalent in clothing resellers or people that are selling used clothing and shoes. They'll run into a thrift store, they'll go to a garage sale, and they'll just buy up a bunch of stuff that they think are good brands to resell.
Right, because everybody has brands in their minds that they know when they go to department stores. Oh, this shirt was $57 new, right? So you think, oh, it definitely is worth money because it's an expensive new item, which is absolutely not the case. And that's what happened to us. That's when we got burned.
I mean, I did it myself. I went to a thrift store and I was like, well, I'm going to buy every Polo Ralph Lauren shirt that I find, every Tommy Hilfiger shirt that I find, because those are expensive brands retail. When in reality, that's a flooded market, and we listed those items and they didn't sell, and we couldn't really figure out why they weren't selling. And we come to find out that the demand just wasn't there. And we could have totally avoided that situation by just doing our research. It takes 2 seconds while you're in a thrift store to look up the items on your phone and make sure that you're making the correct purchase.
And even to this day, resellers need to know that the demand for items is changing, right? Everything's always shifting, supply and demand type of market. Lululemon used to be worth insane amounts of money. Now it's still worth a lot, but not as much as it used to be. Tommy Bahama, all of it used to be really great, but now it's so prevalent in thrift stores and it's not worth even, I would say it's decreased at least 40% in value. And now it's not even all Tommy Bahama, it's only certain Tommy Bahama that's worth selling. And even at that, you have to make sure that you get it really cheap. So really, we want to help you out and point out that even if you are experienced and you are watching this, that you need to stay up to date with trends because supply and demand constantly changing. Everything's shifting, just like the stock market, depending on how many people are finding certain amounts of things, putting them online for sale.
Do your research.
Do your research.
So that's mistake number 1 that we made. Mistake number 2, definitely another Ryan mistake, is we bought too much of the same product. And this more pertains to when we got into our first bulk buys, our first sort of wholesale orders. We started working with a few people who could get us a lot of the same kind of stock. And we didn't really know about demand and sell-through rates. We didn't really understand that the item has to be in very high demand for you to go and buy 1,000 of one thing, right? So I made a few mistakes in the beginning, first started buying bulk, where I didn't look at the 60-day sell-through rate. I didn't look at the demand on Amazon. I didn't look at the demand on eBay. I just kind of bought because I thought that it was a good product. I knew how to do my research to make sure that we were going to make money on it, but I didn't know how long it was going to take for that item to sell or for those items to sell. So, and the prime example of that is the one that I'll never live down is the hair dyes. And we actually ended up making money on them, but it took a long time. It took over a year. I bought like 2,000 boxes, I think, of hair dye, different colors, different shades, lots of different things.
I like that.
Hair dye. And that was, looking back, it was a bad buy because it was a very good deal and we made money on it. But if you take like the time and effort that was put into selling those items, it really wasn't worth it. So even though we probably ended up netting like $1,000 on the deal total, it took a year for that to happen, and it took a lot of man hours and woman hours.
A lot of woman hours and a lot
work.
of storage space.
Yeah.
And it was not worth the $1,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just wasn't for the amount of time and energy we put into it.
So now when I'm looking at buying in bulk, I'm always making sure to look at that sell-through rate. If I'm going to be buying 100 of one thing, I want to look and see how many of them have sold in the last 60 days. If only 20 of those items have sold on eBay in the last 60 days, it's probably not an item that we want to get into heavily, if that makes sense.
Right. And even with used items, when we're thrifting, whenever we look at an item, if we see 20 listed and only 5 sales, we typically won't pick up that item, right? Because there's too many listed versus recent sales. And if you see too many sporadic sales anyways, right?
Right.
We'll skip that item because we don't want an item that's not selling every single day because it's going to sit for a long time. There's a lot of competition out there, especially in the used market. So we've even transferred that over to used items and not only just too many of the same item.
And going back to, that's a perfect example for the new resellers, especially when you're new, you should be looking out for only in-demand items. You don't want stuff that's going to tie up your capital. You want stuff that you can buy and then flip very quickly, get the capital back, and put it into more and more flips. That's how you build a good base so that you can start making bigger and bigger buys. Okay, so mistake number 1 was we didn't do our research. Mistake number 2 was we bought too much of the same type of inventory. Mistake number 3, this is kind of a different type of one that you may not have heard or seen before. Our third big mistake that we did as new eBay sellers is that we ran too many auctions on eBay. And again, I think that comes back to just us being kind of naive in the marketplace. Or me again. we thought that eBay was an auction marketplace. When we first got into it, we were like, okay, well, eBay, the way that you make money on eBay is you run auctions, because that's how people buy stuff on eBay. They bid on items and they win the auctions and they buy stuff. We didn't look at eBay as like a retail store where we could have our items listed for a price and then people would just come and buy it. We thought that you had to run auctions. So a lot of what happened when we first started is we would list items for like 99-cent starting prices. And then we had all these items, because we were brand new sellers, didn't really have a lot of feedback. So our items just weren't getting like a whole lot of traction. We would have all of these listings ending for one bid of 99 cents on these items, and then we ended up losing money. And I wanted to say this one because I think that, it's a question that we get all the time. How do you guys list items? At the beginning, I think it's good to run auctions. Just make sure that you're setting your prices, your starting bid at the right price. But running auctions when you're new is good because you get sales, fast sales, and you get feedback. But I think that it's more important to make sure that you're also doing buy it now items and setting your prices at or a little bit below the market value when you first start out, so that you're getting those consistent sales.
Right, you don't want to be greedy in the beginning because you can't be. You can't really afford to be greedy in the beginning. You need people to purchase items from you, and you need that feedback from them. And if you don't have it, what better way to do it than to give somebody a pretty good deal? They get the item, they're happy, they leave you good feedback if you're lucky.
But don't run too many auctions. That's the point of that mistake, is if you're 100% auctions starting at 99 cents, maybe try a different strategy. Yeah. And speaking of listing, mistake number 4 is one that I think we're both kind of guilty of. Finally, one that's not just me.
Oh, well, I probably would have made all of those mistakes anyways.
And mistake number 4 is we let listings, or we let items pile up and create death piles that we didn't list.
Yeah.
The most fun part about this job is sourcing. We all know that. The best part is going out and finding the treasure and finding the items that you can sell. And I think we're all guilty of like letting our work pile up, and then it gets to the point where there's money sitting there that we haven't listed, and we're still going out to thrift stores and garage sales and auctions, and we're still sourcing, and at the end of the day you get home and you just have too much stuff to list. So one way that we figured out how to get over that mistake is we would make sure we would organize, and we still do this today, we organize our items into piles of like 20, 30 items so that it's smaller chunks, smaller bites, and then we focus on those piles, right? So we'll say, okay, we're gonna knock out these 100 items, 20 items per pile this week. We're not sourcing, we're knocking out these items, we're knocking out these piles. And once we get to the end, once those items are listed, then our treat, our reward is going sourcing.
Ryan sources anyways.
Oh, wow. Called out. Well, okay, it's different now because we have a Callie and a Ben to take our pictures for us and do our listings, and we're super thankful for them. But that allows me to go out and source more, obviously.
Right, we want to keep making content, right? Like,
Yeah.
we know you guys want to see us sourcing and what we're finding,
Yeah.
and share with you our experiences currently of what we're finding, right? Because, again, the market's changed, so we put back a lot of things that maybe in the past we used to buy, right? Especially like Tommy Bahama stuff. Mm-hmm. We used to buy most of that, and now we buy maybe 5% of it that we see. So we want to share experience with you. So we're guilty of that now still. Like, we still buy a little too much for our death pile. But we have a Ben.
And a Callie.
And a Callie, of course. And we know that we got to keep them busy, right?
Exactly.
Sorry, Ben and Callie.
But if you're a one-man show or one-woman show, I would highly recommend doing what I said and breaking it up into smaller chunks and knocking out your tasks before you go and source more. It's hard to be disciplined like that, but if you can do it at the beginning, it'll make it easier as your business grows into a bigger and bigger thing. Yeah.
You don't want to overwhelm yourself. And again, if you have a pile of items that are $15 and under, and you have another pile of items that are $25 and over, and you just never get to this $15 and under pile, donate it. Move on.
Sometimes.
Go to the higher worth items. Just keep inspiring, encouraging yourself to work. You don't want to be discouraged and overwhelmed by the, like the small bites.
Yeah, or sell it really cheap.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot of the times we work with students who they've been in the business for quite a while and they have all of this inventory. They have a lot of, maybe like half their eBay store or items that they bought when they were new resellers and they just never sold. And we'll tell them, like, listen, free that space from your head and your environment. Like, get it out of your house, get it out of your wherever you're working out of, and just clear it out. Even if you're losing money or breaking even on it, it's better to get that revenue back. And now that you know what you're doing and you have the knowledge to go and buy the right items, get that capital back and put it into the right items. So that's a good point. That's like another tip.
Yeah, because a lot of people are running out of listings, right?
Yeah.
So what better way than to get rid of those beginner items to make up space for new listings?
Yes. So mistake number 4 that we made was not listing our items fast enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
And last but not least, mistake number 5 that we made as new eBay resellers is when we finally got onto social media, YouTube, Instagram, and everything, we compared ourselves to bigger sellers, which I think is a no-no. I think it's a bad idea to take what you're doing and compare it to other sellers who are established. And even now, we're the sellers that are established, we have to be very careful, I think, about what sort of content we're putting out on YouTube. We don't want you to think that it's unattainable to do what we do, because you have to remember that we also started out with $200. We started out going to garage sales, going to thrift stores, grinding it out, and we built our capital big enough where we could start doing bigger and bigger buys.
It took a while to get there.
It did. It takes a while.
Beginning. Yeah.
It takes time, it takes patience, it takes dedication, but you can't compare yourself, especially there's a lot of accounts out there that they'll post these extravagant numbers, these huge numbers, like we made $2 million this month. And you sit back and you get kind of discouraged because you're like, well, I only made $500 this month. What are they doing that I'm not doing? And it's really not fair, because you're seeing the duck above the water, but you're not seeing the legs underneath the water kicking and working on the business. They may have 100 employees working that they have to pay.
True.
They may have crazy overhead. It actually aggravates me when I see people posting these big numbers without a backstory on how they made the numbers, or at least telling like what their net on that is, because a lot of these big sellers will post these $2 million numbers when they're taking home like 50 grand at the end of the day.
Right, so a lot of people do need perspective to understand. Like, net versus gross, right?
Yes.
Because you see a gross number, but you really need to understand net and then what it takes to get there,
Right.
right? Because net is after all your expenses, so
Right.
that's after employees.
Right.
And people think, oh, somebody's making all this money, they're keeping all this money, but they're not.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that that number that they're posting gross is 100% not what they're netting. And those
Yeah.
are two different things, and you have to be able to differentiate them, especially in here.
Yeah.
Because that can like hurt here.
It can, yeah.
You
And,
know?
and even so, like, even if they are doing net $2 million, like, you can't compare yourself working with a small budget, just starting out. You can't compare yourself to those sellers. You can use it as a goal. Absolutely, that's perfectly fine.
Of
You can use it as a
course.
goal. You can use it as motivation, but don't let it discourage you from actually doing the business. And those are our 5 top mistakes that we made as young eBay sellers.
I like it.
Yeah.
Those are, I mean, you know, those are pretty harsh learning curves for us, but
Absolutely.
they weren't the worst.
Yeah.
I mean, could have been worse.
I think the cool thing for us is that, you know, we literally did start from the bottom and we've worked our way to where we are now. And we're nowhere near the best reseller in the world. But we have established ourselves as a really good company and we're working on our business every single day. And I think it's important for us, again, to remember to do videos like this. You know, the vlogging is fun, the garage sales are fun, it's entertaining for you guys, but I think that sometimes you need to hear that we are people too. We absolutely make mistakes in this business, and we want to tell you guys those mistakes and how to avoid them. So
Yeah.
hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button for us. We appreciate it. And maybe watch some of our other videos. I'll link more videos in the description of this video.
Yeah, you will.
Besides that, guys, we really appreciate you watching. Thanks so much. I'm Ryan Roots.
I'm Ralli Roots,
And
and
together
together
we
we
are
are Ralli Roots. Wait, let's do that again. And together, I
We
miss
are
our
Ralli
Ralli Roots. Did you hear it?
Peace out, guys. Bye.